thank you all for coming. I'm Sadie McKeown. I'm the president of the Community Preservation Corporation, and I've been at CPC for more than 33 years. And so I think I embody the commitment that we all have at CPC to really driving innovation and change in neighborhoods and creating opportunities for property owners, for residents, for government to really come together and find solutions to the affordable housing problems that we have in our communities. Over the last 15 years, I've actually had the privilege at CPC of running our sustainability platform. We stood up a green financing initiative in 2008 because the cost of utilities was enormous. Oil was $150 a barrel, and that puts huge pressure on affordability. People just think about rent when they think about affordability, but utilities are actually a huge contributor. So we stood up a green financing initiative with the simple idea that we would use mortgage proceeds to address the higher cost of making a building much more energy efficient. And we've stuck with that idea. And it has been a lot to take on. It's been very hard because there hasn't been a resource for us to use to support sustainability alongside of affordability, and you can't take money away from affordability to make a building more resilient or more sustainable. But yet we carried on, and we are a carbon neutral company. We have been since 2020. We were the first nonprofit real estate company to do that. And since we started counting our investments in 2015, we've invested more than $1.3 billion in sustainable projects. And we are proud to be at the forefront of driving sustainability alongside of affordability, having just won in a coalition with two other partners, Climate United, Calvert Impact Capital, and Self-Help, $7 billion to help transition to the clean energy economy. And for our part, that means providing subordinate debt capital to teach first mortgage lenders how to decarbonize buildings at scale. And so we're really excited about that and really proud of that. I think one of the things that makes CPC unique, thank you. That feels good, thank you. One of the things that makes us unique is that we transact at scale. And when you transact as much as CPC does, you really get to see what does work and what doesn't work. And I'm really excited that we're hosting this today because it really is a forum for all of those great ideas. But as we look at the affordability crisis, we have to look at climate. Climate change is impacting the housing stock in this country. We're losing units every year. Units are becoming far less affordable. Lots of units are at risk, can't get insurance. It's a huge problem. So just to frame that, in the decade of the 1980s, there were $33 billion storms. That's over 10 years. In the 2010s, 2010 to 2020, that number grew to $131 billion storms. And just this year alone, in 2024, we are already at 24 billion-dollar storms, and the year's not over yet. And we just saw the huge snowstorm across the Great Lakes with the lake effect. You can't have a 51-degree Great Lake without a lot of snow coming off of that. So the threat is increasing, and at CPC we said we have to walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to address both crises, the affordability crisis as well as the climate crisis. And so for this panel, we are going to look at some innovation around the built environment. So we're going to look at Amin Irving. He's going to come up and talk to us about his modular factory. There's been a lot of stuff going on in modular housing, not all of it great. I think Amin has figured it out. And he's going to talk to us about his company's vertically integrated model for creating affordable net zero housing, which is awesome, very resilient as well. Ken Calligar is going to come up third, actually, but I wanted to introduce him next because he's also going to talk about buildings. He's got some really cool, he's the CEO of RSG 3D, which is a building company, and he has created disaster-proof building materials that can prepare multifamily buildings to withstand floods, fires, and all kinds of storms. Really cool and innovative. Bomee Jung, who is the co-founder of Cadence OneFive, is going to come up and talk about her approach to sharing clean energy retrofit data in order to scale the transformation in our built environment. I want to pause on this one just to say this is really critical to the work that CPC is doing because we are trying to change the way the first mortgage markets address climate in the work that they routinely do. So you see insurance companies are obsessed with climate, right, because it's impacting their nonprofit. And lenders writ large have not addressed it at the investment level. Maybe they have as large corporations, but at the investment level, they haven't really addressed it because there has been a lack of data that really proves that when you make something deeply energy efficient and more resilient, it adds value and there's actual cash flow to leverage so that you don't need my $2.4 billion of greenhouse gas reduction funds to make a building more resilient and more energy efficient. And then lastly, we're going to have Phil Thompson, who's professor of political science and urban planning at MIT and a former deputy mayor here in New York City. And he's going to share an opportunity on how we make our grid more resilient. So you can think about buildings, you can think about transitioning every building to clean energy and all electric. When I look out my office window at CPC and I see all those buildings and try to imagine them all being electric, it overwhelms me a little bit. And one of the things people always say is, well, can the grid handle it? And it's, you know, it's a really valid concern. And Phil has come up with some really cool things with his team at MIT around virtual power plants. So before I turn it over to Amin, I just want to remind everybody, questions on the back of the cards, and I'll come back up at the end. We're going to have a great conversation. So, Amin.
My name's Amin Irving, hailing from Detroit. Anybody from Detroit? So I can't even say what up though, so my name is Amin Irving. I'm the founder of an ecosystem of companies, Ginosko Development Company, Ginosko Construction, and Ginosko Modular. I'm here to talk to you about Ginosko Modular. Ginosko Modular is a self-funded, without any outside capital, modular manufacturing facility in Romulus, Michigan. A little bit about our organization. Started Ginosko Development Company in 2002, morphed it into, I don't know, 39 properties, I think, when this presentation was done. 39 properties with a capitalized value of a little over $400 million. A couple years ago, we were one of 5 Black-led development companies that was selected by Citigroup to have our first institutional fund. And then shortly after that, we launched our modular manufacturing facility. And here we are doing some pretty dope stuff. This is actually a little bit old. We're at about $650 million right now, but who's really counting? So let's talk about modular manufacturing. I did a deal in 2006 where I took over a deal from a person that literally didn't show up to a closing. I think he had a drug addiction. And the limited partners came to me saying, Amin, will you close this deal? Well, I was under a very, very tight timeline, still needed, all those LIHTC, timelines before I knew I could get a waiver and get an extension. But I ran to modular manufacturing, and it worked like a charm. A modular builder out of Ohio did 30 single-family homes, got the deal done, and I was super hyped about that. But I'm a multifamily guy. I'm not a single-family guy. And I wanted to be able to build multifamily apartment buildings using the modular concept. But there wasn't that in Michigan, and there wasn't that in the Midwest. Make a long story short, some LIHTC or New Markets Tax Credit allocatee came to me saying, Amin, I just got awarded New Markets tax credits and I don't know what the heck to do with them. And I was like, well, maybe we could do a factory. He was like, let's go. And so what I did was I took a building that received 4% and 9% tax credits and said, okay, if we built it traditional, how much would it cost and what would the time be? Versus if we built it modular, how much would it cost and what would the time be? And I think what you see on the screen is that we realized that you could produce buildings 35 to 50% faster. We priced it out, both traditional and modular, and it was a 26% reduction in construction costs. And what was cool about our ecosystem is we're not trying to be like that greedy developer. We're trying to say, how can we use the cost savings to have a strategic advantage in markets? And so we analyzed a bunch of markets in the Midwest and saw that we could actually build brand new product right next to an existing building using modular manufacturing and reduce the rents by 10% of what the current market rate is. And so we could pass those awesome modular savings on to the residents. If y'all don't know what modular manufacturing is, it's basically building Lego blocks or Jenga blocks on an assembly line. And so this is a good one. You build a site plan, right? If you say, hey, I've got a site that I want to develop something on, you build a site plan, then you build the Jenga blocks on the site. As a matter of fact, in number 2, that is the inside of a box at the end of assembly line where mechanical, electrical, plumbing, the only thing you can't do in a box at our factory is flush the toilet and turn on the water, but everything else, you're good. You take that box, you deliver it to the site, you put the skin and the roof on top of it, and you've got an apartment building. This is a deal that we're actually doing with a tribe that owns a casino that wants to build affordable housing next to their casino, and this is pretty cool on how we do things at Ginosko. So at Ginosko Modular, we also have in-house design, right? So we can do everything soup to nuts, design all the way to turnkey. This is a design that we've done for them, and this is really, really cool. So here's the floor layout, right, of what they're looking for. But the real sophistication and ingenuity is right here. How all the boxes are put together to make that floor layout, right? So we have unique boxes that can turn around and make that floor layout for that building. And we can price it all. One of the secret things that people don't like to talk about is why are construction costs so high? Well, construction costs are so high because the design that's given for permitting is just specific enough to build the building, but it's not specific enough to price it all the way down to the soups and nuts. And so having a factory allows us to know exactly how many 2x4s, how many nails, and price it so that we can reduce the affordability. These are the types of deals that we do. We all know about the housing crisis. In Michigan, a person has to work 77 hours. The person working minimum wage has to work 77 hours a week to afford a 2-bedroom and 62 hours a week to afford a 1-bedroom. The crisis is real. So let's talk about carbon reduction, which is what Sadie really brought me here for. And so as we were developing this whole modular manufacturing concept, we were like, okay, how can we also bring down cost savings for the residents in an even more sophisticated way, not just using the cost of construction and the timing of construction, but actually, am I out of time? I don't think the clock started. But let's talk about carbon reduction strategies real quick, and I'll be quick. A lot of people talk about carbon reduction, but there are 3 real ways to reduce carbon, right? There's the active way, which everybody talks about. Lights, Energy Star appliances and all that other good stuff. But there's also this thing called embodied carbon reduction. And that's like, let's say we're building a Lego castle. An embodied carbon reduction strategy is like counting up all the energy that it took to make those Legos, from digging up the plastic to bring it to the store, right? And that's where modular really, really shines, because there's an embodied structure. I can tell you right now that the country of Japan mandates modular manufacturing because they only have a finite amount of space. And in modular manufacturing, they've concluded that there's 51% less waste in the landfill than traditional construction, right? And so that's like embodied carbon reduction strategies. Passive carbon reduction strategies is like building the building in a way so that the light shines into the windows to keep the building warm, rather than positioning it inefficiently and having to use more, right, HVAC. And then you guys know what active is. You know, we can talk about that. So when it comes to carbon reduction strategies, okay? The two key things that you guys need to think about in the 7 years of deploying IRA capital is EUI. That's energy use intensity, right? That's the total energy consumed by the total gross floor area, right? It's kind of like the miles per gallon, but for energy consumption. The other thing you need to think about is benchmarking energy, right? So, like an office space has a different EUI benchmark than a multifamily, right? And so when it comes to multifamily, the benchmark, the standard energy use consumption is, I want to say 50.6. And so when you're trying to tap into IRA dollars, one of the rules is that you need to be at like 25. You need to be at 50% of your benchmark energy standard. And so what we at Ginosko Modular did was we looked at how we designed our boxes. And we said, hey, we have the capacity to calculate our energy use, or our EUI, and carbon reduction strategies for every single modular project that we do. And so for every building that we design, we could calculate our EUI and our carbon emission reduction. Done? I'm done. All right. Bottom line, we developed a box that gets to net zero, okay? It was very, very difficult, but we developed a box that gets to net zero, and we're super excited about being able to do a development in Detroit that does net zero boxes, that's using institutional capital, no LIHTCs, and NCIF dollars. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Bomee Jung. I'm co-founder and CEO of Cadence OneFive, and we make software to speed up carbon-responsive construction in existing multifamily buildings. It's an honor to join all of you here today to celebrate 50 years of CPC. So, yay! So today I want to talk about a challenge that's both urgent and enormous. We need to increase multifamily building renovations by some 400% in the coming years to meet our climate goals. Multifamily housing houses about a quarter of US households and already spends $63 billion a year on renovations. And so given this enormous market, you would think that we've got all of this figured out. But decarbonization is not business as usual. It introduces new complexities that our current processes simply aren't really built to handle. And we can't afford the time to have every project team learn every lesson firsthand. So the solution to this is something much more fundamental than just technology. It's really about how we think about data. There's sort of three categories of data that's relevant to decarbonization. One is One is building characteristics data, and that's information about the physical attributes of your building, when it was built, how many units it has, what kind of systems it has, what kind of windows, that sort of thing. The second category is data that's generated by operating the building. This is where that famous saying, like, you can't manage what you don't measure comes in. And it usually generates a huge amount of very detailed data that you're meant to use to fine-tune the operations of your building, but it often doesn't have very much impact on your ability to actually do a construction project. But there's a third category of data that we almost never capture that would have an outsized impact on construction, and that is project data. So think about the complex process, this maze that you're seeing, that we engage in for retrofits, and that each step in this process, there's valuable information that's generated and then just lost. So pricing for construction, how adding a particular measure affects your project schedule, what really works and what doesn't work in particular types of buildings. And right now we're letting all of this learning just float away. But imagine if we had a full picture built up from all of the projects in the market so that you could know real-time pricing and performance, what a difference that would make for everybody. So here's what's crucial to understand. It's not just about collecting data for data's sake. The key is knowing what kind of data is relevant to capital planning and when decision makers actually need that information. So let me walk you through how this could work. At the very start of the project, we only need a very few key pieces of information to do basic screening for potential construction scope and put that in front of owners. There's no need for extensive data collection until we actually have the initial feedback and buy-in from that owner. And then once they're interested, we can initiate more targeted on-site data collection to refine the scope to get to where we need to. And as this project develops, various stakeholders will naturally contribute data as part of their work. So owners will provide additional information about that building to refine the cost estimates. Contractors will share their pricing to win the jobs. Commissioning agents can upload testing reports to document project completion. So every stakeholder needs to get value out of the data that they're sharing, and the what and the when of the data collection should follow from how we actually do our decarbonization projects. So we're already seeing the power of this approach in New York City. Because we have access to detailed building characteristics data, we at Cadence were able to combine that with 25 years of building science learning to predict what work needs to be done and what outcomes to expect. And we can do this for basically any multifamily building in New York City. So we generate preliminary scopes of work instantaneously, shaving months off of the planning process. So what we need to do is stop thinking about projects as these self-contained entities and start seeing them as part of a greater ecosystem of data for the whole industry. So without access to data about existing conditions, measures that are implemented, and resulting outcomes, we're essentially starting from scratch in every project, wasting time and resources while increasing project risks. And here's the good news. We have a unique opportunity to change all of this. And lenders are perfectly positioned to make it happen. Just as environmental hazard assessments are a standard non-optional part of every real estate loan process, decarbonization data collection could become part of our regular business operations. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund in particular gives us the perfect moment to establish these new standards. By making standardized data collection and sharing a requirement for funding, we can create the consistent feedback loop that our industry desperately needs. Every retrofit project can generate valuable information about costs, timelines, and outcomes, making the next project easier, cheaper, and less risky. So like many of, maybe all of you in this room, I'm a houser first, right? And so the mission that we have at Cadence OneFive is that everyone should have access to safe and affordable housing that protects them well from the effects of climate change. So this isn't about being green, it's really about the core mission of housing to protect people in the environment that's coming to us right now. Thank you very much for your attention.
My name's Ken. I'm the CEO of RSG 3D. Our company marries extreme disaster resilience with sustainability and life cycle affordability. Actually, we're going to start right there. So that's a $12 million house at the Costa Palmas Resort in Baja, Mexico. It's a Four Seasons residence. And that's an RSG 3D house. What in the world does that have to do with affordability? Let's find out. We have a disaster problem here in the United States. If a building can burn down, blow down, shake apart, or substantially degrade over an expected lifetime, by definition, not sustainable. Therefore, your first principle has to be resilience. That building has to be a building envelope that's going to last and allow you to thrive in that environment. So the US has the largest investment in history, global history, in built environment, but we have one of the worst resilience capacities of any industrialized country. That's a problem. It's a problem decades in the making. Everybody's guilty, from the buyers to the developers, and a lot of it comes down to the notion of first cost rather than life cycle affordability. And for some reason, we simply believe that we live in a benign world. We don't. I personally know more people who have lost their house to natural disaster than I know people who didn't. That's my own problem, but that's our business. So are we resilient? Absolutely not. On any measure are we resilient in the United States. So how do you get out of this? You have to change platforms, right? Go back to that slide I just showed you, and we're looking at 200 years of unchanged building methods and materials and lower productivity the whole way through. So what have we experienced since 1980? We've experienced accelerating natural disasters. That's a chart of the incidence of billion-dollar natural disasters. Last year, we hit a record at 23. If you could invest in a company like that, you'd make a fortune, right? So we're on the other side of that. We're on the expense side of that. We have to bend that curve. 77% of the United States is in extreme disaster zones, according to Dodge data. That's a big problem if you want to have a thriving society. So I was an investment banker and a CEO of a company and other things, and I stumbled into this business. And in 2018, after a long period of study, I started a company called Restructure Group, RSG3D. We make a structural, concrete, insulated panel that combines resilience, energy efficiency, healthfulness, and affordability. So this is your building envelope. It's your exterior walls, it's your roof, it's your intermediate floors, it's the party walls between units in a multifam. And you can build virtually anything with this. It's expanded polystyrene in the center for continuous insulation, a steel truss system, which is proprietary, and it's covered in concrete on site. So in 30 years, 20 countries, 6,000 deployments, we've had exactly 0 damage from anything. Wildfire, hurricane, seismic, flood. We've had some pretty interesting, we even have NATO ballistic ratings we supplied to the Army in Iraq and Afghanistan. So let's go a little bit further here. As Sadie mentioned, we have kind of a combined problem here. We have to get a lot of volume out there into the housing world. And unfortunately, you're intertwined with resilience. If you cannot break that bond, if you don't have resilient building, you can't make affordability go forward, and you can't make attainability and amount of housing go forward. So this is a typical RSG3D building. Most RSG3D buildings are 100% panel for their structure, walls, floors, roofs, etc. This is a 80-foot tall multifam on the beach in Baja. This photo is actually 22 years old. That building's been hit by every type of typhoon you can have in Baja. It's basically the flip side of Florida, and it has never even lost a roof tile. What you're seeing here is the panels, made to order, 40-foot long in this case. They're balloon framing the first 3 stories, and they'll go up 2 more stories from there. That is completely light, strong, and disaster resilient, and you can move a lot of material fast. That's the building right there. It's called La Residencia. You can have a condo there for a couple $1 million, I gather. This is the Four Seasons resort, and we're also doing the Amin resorts in Baja. This is our most noteworthy building in here. This is the LEED Silver Chamber of Commerce for Palm Desert Chamber of Commerce. It was the first LEED building in that area. It won 19 architectural and environmental awards. It's a net zero building. The solar's over there to the right. Interestingly, there's not a straight wall in that building. Every wall is radiused. Most of them are off plumb to get a passive house shade effect. That building has been lauded in many ways. So look, we've done industrial, we've done commercial, we've done government, we've done schools. In Mexico, by code, certain areas you can't build a school with anything but RSG because of seismic risk. That's a typical house. This house just set a per square foot sales price in Napa. That's photos from about a month ago, and that building is now complete in concrete. So beyond resilience, what do we need to do in here? We need to get some life cycle affordability, right? Now look, I think we're making, sorry about that, I think we're making 400, 500-year buildings in here, which is a vast departure from the methodologies and materials that are being used out there these days, okay? We know, based upon observation, that these are typical numbers for an RSG3D home. We're cutting energy by 50% versus a new code-compliant house. Matter of fact, last year, our Houston builder won the Green Home of the Year. They won a DOE award. They won a ResNet Energy Award. They had a HERS rating of 41. That builder built 600 wood frame homes in his career. On his second RSG3D home, all of a sudden, he's the builder of the year. What did he do differently? He didn't get a lot smarter, he didn't get better looking, he just built walls, floors, and roofs out of RSG. And he should be thanking us for that. Maintenance will come down about 50%. A maintenance number consists of appliances plus your building envelope maintenance and whatnot. So we only bend the curve, obviously not on the appliances, but just on the building, and that is coming down by about 95%. So you get a big savings there in maintenance. And the final aspect of it is it's actually insurable, right? In California and Florida and all of these regions, you have really difficult times getting insurance at this point. We have received discounts from insurance companies of up to 52%, okay? Put all those numbers together, What happens? Am I ready? Okay, I'm wiping out. All right, so I'm going to finish up real strong here. Put all those numbers together, you get a lot of lifetime savings. We're in an MOU to do 100,000 units of affordable housing in the Philippines, but I want to show you this, Sadie, this is important. By the way, we're launching our own ADU division. Side by side, 2 RSG buildings, $12 million Four Seasons, and Habitat for Humanity buildings built in 1991. These buildings were among the only that survived Hurricane Andrew. And today, they're worth about $350,000. They have built generational wealth. Why? Because they were able to survive storm, because they had lower energy maintenance costs, lower operating costs for 33 years. So this gives me a real interesting notion that's been rattling around in my head. We all have our clients' names on the plans, but I don't think we've yet met our clients. The client that I care about here is the daughter or the son that grows up healthy in this house and safe, that can afford a college education, that lives in a healthy, happy, safe family and vibrant community. Thank you very much.
I'll say up front, I'm going to show slides, but I'm not going to describe them or read to you about them to save time, because I know we're running way over. They asked me to say where I started in affordable housing, and it was 50 years ago this year. I co-founded Asian Americans for Equality. I'm not Asian, but I was working with folks in Chinatown to try and get local residents hired on the building construction of Confucius Plaza in Chinatown, which was a battle. And also, we were trying to find affordable housing for folks who had become homeless, and took a shell of a building which was falling apart and got started. Like I said, I was 18. Doris Koo was our first head of AFI, who later became head of enterprise. Long story. I worked for David Dinkins, who was borough president of Manhattan, for 4 years, and I want to kind of correct something that was said about Ed Koch earlier. I see Mark Willis is here. He may remember we're probably the only people in here who were around back then. But we organized a citywide campaign around affordable housing. I think it's important to say that at this point in our nation's history, it was not a consensus process. And the old Board of Estimate outvoted the mayor, 6-3, I believe, to initiate a $5.2 billion affordable housing program with Mark Willis and Felice Machete and other brilliant people. Led that fight, led that construction effort, but that's how it happened. ANHD, came out of that. The head of it, Barika's here today, et cetera. It took organizing. Communities, people. It was not consensus. We may be back there now. I also served as deputy mayor under Bill de Blasio, where I didn't do affordable housing, but I got to work with two extraordinary developers, Alicia Glenn and Vicki Bean. Now I'm going to talk about virtual power plants. Virtual power plants are a response to a problem faced by electrical grids across the country, which is that most of the grids are either at capacity or near capacity, yet we keep increasing demand for electricity for things like electric heat pumps, electric vehicles, AI, computers, and so on. Building new power plants is expensive, and it takes a long time to bring them online, often over a decade. A faster and cheaper alternative is to win the cooperation of communities to better coordinate energy supply and demand. That's the first slide. There are many ways communities can help stabilize the grid. If thousands of homeowners or renters install electric thermostats, for example, and allow their utility to raise the temperature in their home or apartment a few degrees on a hot summer day when demand for electricity is very high, this can have the same effect as creating a new power plant to supply more electricity. Similarly, if electric vehicle owners or people with solar storage batteries agree to sell some of their stored energy to the grid during peak demand hours, this can have a similar effect as a power plant. Imagine if all the school buses in New York City had EV batteries, which they will, and during the summertime, when they aren't using these buses anyway, they were able to supply energy to the grid. It would be like having a power plant. The organizations that enable these kinds of agreements between communities and utilities are called virtual power plants. It's a complex landscape, you can see it. There are a growing number of VPPs around the country, maybe 100, and the Department of Energy is trying to create more. Almost all are for-profit companies, often spun off from utilities or solar installers. Most are having difficulty gaining community support because community residents don't know these companies. They just think people are trying to sell them something. They're not part of any kind of community-driven process. Also, nearly all of the for-profit VPPs avoid low-income multifamily housing, in part because they lack experience in dealing with landlord-tenant issues, and in part because many low-income buildings require basic weatherization, which most existing virtual power plants don't do. Slide 3 makes the point that low-income people, if things keep going the way they are now, are going to have higher and higher utility bills because wealthier people are moving off the grid. So the cost of maintaining the grid is falling more and more on low-income people. If you've gotten bills from Con Ed recently, you know what I'm talking about. The innovation we want to introduce is to make VPPs community-oriented, community-owned, and community-governed clean energy solution centers. We call this concept civic virtual power plants. And civic VPPs, I kind of think of as what CDCs became over time. I remember when we were helped training folks on building CDCs. Now they're almost taken for granted. We don't have anything like that in the energy space. And we think in order to green low-income communities, there is a need for this type of entity. This is complicated work, which will take technical training and community engagement to accomplish, but what's more complicated than affordable housing? I don't know of anything more complicated. An example of what could be done with a civic VPP is a recent project at Boston Medical Center, along with MIT. The hospital leveraged renewable tax credits to retrofit its buildings for energy efficiency, which saved them $60 million. But beyond that, they teamed up with MIT and built a solar array, a big one in North Carolina. And with revenue from the solar energy they sell to a North Carolina utility, the hospital is now helping pay utility bills for their poorest patients who can't afford heat in the winter or air conditioning in the summer. There are now lots of safety net hospitals that want to do similar things, and we are looking to develop a similar initiative in Brownsville and Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And instead of paying patients utility bills, we're exploring the possibility of leveraging Inflation Reduction Act tax credits for nonprofits to enable the hospital to buy out some slum landlords and make the buildings both healthy and green. We believe that nonprofit housing managers, city agencies like HPD, public housing agencies, and willing multifamily building owners could put together a large portfolio of housing units willing to help utilities stabilize the grid. Even better if they partner with schools and hospitals and other large energy users. Last year, Con Ed charged ratepayers $450 million in New York City to maintain backup and dirty reserve power plants called peaker plants. This would no longer be necessary. Peaker plants can be shut down, and the money that maintained those plants could instead be used to reduce electricity costs for low-income people while greening low-income housing. Thank you.